Awooga, awooga, awooga. Welcome to Department Talk Bollocks. Widely inaccurate, probably offensive, definitely amateur. Department TB is a programme presented by three humanoids. One of those humanoids is myself, Philip.
And I'm Dave Lister.
Are you?
I am now.
And I'm Scott.
So, in this episode, as you may have already guessed, we are going to be talking about Red Dwarf. So open a can of leopard lager, strap on your bazookoid, and put down that textbook for your astronavigation exam. So I think we'll get started in the way that we seem to have done in the past, and we'll discuss our first memories of Red Dwarf. Andrew, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, my first memories of Red Dwarf was actually watching the very first episode when it first came out on TV.
Never.
Yes, it was, and Craig Charles never believed me when I told him about it. He did actually say that there was only 2 people ever watched the very first episode, and I did say I was one of them. I did actually go in school the next day and tell everybody else, and everybody suddenly started watching it from episode 2 onwards, but yeah, I did watch the very first episode.
I don't think we were much... well, how old would you have been? 1? I would have been 2.
The sperm in your mother's eye, yes. So, yeah, that was my first memories of Red Dwarf, actually watching it when it first came out. And don't ask me how I watched it, how I decided to actually watch that first episode. I have no idea. I think it was just on.
Randomly stumbled across it.
Stumbled across it just before it started, and yeah, it's quite an experience.
I mean, this is interesting. Now I look back at it, and I can sort of see where Red Dwarf sits within the pantheon of other sci-fi shows produced on the BBC. Red Dwarf, Blake 7, Doctor Who, Hitchhiker's Guide. I mean, did it look sort of like the other those other shows that were on at the time? Was there something that you know, this is a BBC sci-fi show as opposed to an American sci-fi show? Was it?
I think it was the cheapness of the look of it, and I must admit, both Rob Grant and Doug Naylor did hate the original sets, but I think it was just the greyness. And the funniest thing is I always laugh at that episode. I think it's in Me Too, when they're repainting the ship from was it ship grey to Admiral Grey or something like that, and that was a joke on Doug Naylor and Rob Grant's behalf of the fact that the sets look so shit.
Ocean grey to
they didn't want anything grey, so what did they get when they first walked onto set? A grey set.
Yeah, it was originally the production designer was originally a guy called Paul Montague, I believe.
Yes.
And then he worked on the first 2 series, and then Mel Bibby came over and took over in series 3, and it's instantly kind of. And it's not with any more money. It's just he's.
Well, I was actually going to say that he actually did say that it was cheaper to provide the set design and build the sets for series 3 than it did for series 1 and 2, because he used a lot of really cheap materials like egg boxes.
Yeah.
And things like that, and he
it was clever in giving the set, just a little bit of depth by just having like a grill and shining lights through it. In fact, last night we were watching the Smeg Ups, and you could see it was an episode in series 5. It was in Inquisitor, where they're trying to open the door with a palm print, and Holly's saying we've not got any record of your palm print.
Yeah.
And you could just see the ceiling and you could actually see the studio lights, but they just got like a grill, and it kind of just gives it this kind of industrial feel anyway, and it's very kind of just little tricks like that in making it look more than it was, and kind of almost, I'd say, kind of alien-esque in series 3, whereas 1 and 2 were.
But the one thing that did stand out the most about the first couple of series, I mean, apart from the crappy sets and the one-off shots of the dwarf going past, was the fact that it was quite intense with just the 2 main characters, Rimmer and Lister, doing the talking. Obviously, the cat was the humorous interjections in between, but it was just the fact that it was a really good quality character piece for the first couple of series, more so with the first series, and that's what made it stand out amongst American ones at the time, because obviously American ones are fast running, in your face, whereas Red Dwarf was, a really good, slow moving but very funny character piece.
Well, it's almost kind of more in the vein of kind of Steptoe and Son, when the 2 characters that don't like each other, or porridge in space. I mean, I'm not the first person to come up with that description, but I think that suits it well. You did mention before the ship shots, and I will say that actually I think those model shots are gorgeous.
They are fantastic, but it's just the same shot over and over again.
Well,
there was very little change in those first series, especially.
Yeah, we'll discuss that later on. There's a certain frustration, a few myths about the first few series of Red Dwarf, which I'd like to quash.
Ooh.
But we'll get into that in a little bit more detail.
Is one of the myths the fact that only 2 people watched the first episode, and I was one of them?
No, that's been added to the list now.
Okay.
So, Scott, do you want to give us your first experience of Red Dwarf?
My first experiences to Red Dwarf, believe it or not. I couldn't get into it. I saw the odd episode on TV being shown. Maybe it was because I saw it maybe halfway through the episode, you know what it's like. But sometimes basically the development of the characters I found really hard to get into. I didn't understand why they were there, why they, you know.
Is that because you hadn't seen the first series
exactly,
from the beginning?
And my old flatmate said, I'm going to watch Back to Earth, give it a try. So I thought I'll give it a try. And I thought, oh, this is horrible. I didn't like the episode because it was a 3-parter and it felt pointless. I just thought, what was the point in this? And then once you found out at the end, basically, this whole Back to Earth didn't happen. It was all an illusion, a dream, and you just think, well, was it really Back to Earth? No, it wasn't.
Well, I mean, I would say that it was an anniversary special. That was why it was originally commissioned by Dave. They wanted new content.
Yeah, they managed to find some way to stick Coronation Street still in it. As much as I despise, but I think that was just an excuse for Craig Charles. You know?
Because he lives and works in Manchester and on Coronation Street at the time.
It's a good gag. We'll talk about Back to Earth in more detail a bit later
after
on.
Back to Earth, I remember having a discussion with you in the pub, and you said to me, just give it a try. So I went back, watched it from the pilot episode, and literally only about 3 weeks ago, I binged the whole collection.
See, I've noticed how everything starts in a pub.
It's like... Yeah, but you actually listen, because sometimes I'm given pub recommendations, and by the time I've got home, I've forgotten them, or no, I don't fancy that. It sounded a good idea when I was drunk, but no, I don't fancy watching it.
But I got to admit, I'm glad that I started it from the beginning. I understand now what's going on, and there is some ludicrous, plot holes within the whole thing. But I think that just adds to the humour of it, the blatant.
Yeah. Well, they did say Rob and Grant did say very earlier on that they weren't that interested in continuity, and the fact that different things changed as the series went on.
But I didn't feel like
what exemplifies that, I think, the most is the gap between series 2 and 3. Crichton comes on board. I know there is that scroll which goes really, really fast, and if you pause it and read it, you can actually find out what happened. But if you're watching it on broadcast, you can't do that. So it is quite a surprise in that the sets have suddenly changed. Rimmer's suddenly wearing this Captain Emerald outfit, and Crichton's appeared. There's this new ship to shore ship called the Starbug, and their attitude was, well, we can do it better now. So what's the point in kind of clinging onto the past? Let's just who cares? Let's just get on with telling stories, and that was their whole attitude. It was just like it doesn't matter. It's fine. So I guess my first memory of Red Dwarf would be Series 7, I think. It was when I have a feeling that my dad was watching it on the Friday night, and I just happened to see bits of it, and I was allowed to sort of stay up a little bit later and watch it. But even then, I knew I was pushing it, and I would sort of get sent to bed.
I like how a lot of his stories always seem to revolve around his dad. Basically wanting to sneak and watch the TV. His mum comes in and starts beating him. Makes him change the channel.
Mum often?
No, not at all. She's a lovely woman.
Yet your dad is frightened of her.
Until Coronation Street came on.
Yes.
She turned into this ogre.
Well, this
Get
is
away
right.
from the TV.
Red Dwarf was on at 9 o'clock, so it was after Coronation Street had finished.
Oh, well, I
so
wouldn't know that.
9 o'clock on BBC Two.
Have they not got an adult version of Coronation Street at 9 o'clock then?
Not yet, no. That'll be the next thing, I'm sure.
Ooh.
So yeah, I was I was watched Series 7, and I was kind of aware that the humour was. It was the first time I'd ever kind of watched something that was kind of got an element of adult humour. Not an inordinate amount, but there are there was the occasional swear word or what have you, and the occasional sexual. I can't think of an example in Series 7, but you think about the shrinking boxer scene in Polymorph or something like that.
And like you're on about like the language wise, I think it was Red Dwarf was the very first TV program to actually use the word twat,
Right.
and that was in Polymorph as well.
Yeah, I say let's get out there and twat
it.
Well, there is an episode of Farty Towels, which has got where
flowery twats.
Flowery twats. Yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't said.
Yeah.
And then people really, because they didn't have video and they couldn't rewind it, did it actually say that?
So yeah, I think my first exposure was Series 7. I found it funny. Now I know where Series 7 kind of sits within the pantheon for most Red Dwarf fans, and that it's not the best, but that was my first exposure to it. So perhaps I'm a little bit more easygoing on it. And then I think in between that, I watched some of the remasters, which. So again, I don't think they're horrible. I can definitely see that the original version is better. The model shots are much better than the kind of low-rent CGI.
I think the remastered ones improved slightly when they did the third series remaster, because obviously for the first two series it sat really funny, because obviously the look of the series was quite basic at the time, and the fact that they've done these remastered shots in between made it look rather like a cheap add-on. But it did actually work when they remastered the third series, because it did look a lot better. So the remastered effects did actually improve it slightly. I still miss the model shot.
In some cases, I think the sound mix, apart from in the first episode where Rimmer he sees the cat and he does the kind of the karate chop, and like falls through him. Somebody obviously has never watched the series before, because they put him a crashing sound effect as he goes through it, and like he falls into some plates or something like that.
Which is silly, considering that he can't touch it.
Yeah, it's a hologram, and we've just stated that in the same episode. But other than that, I think the sound mix is quite good, because they actually, whereas it used to be sort of all on one track, they had to listen to the original tapes and pick out the original parts, and that allowed it to be dubbed for international audiences. If it was dubbed for international audiences, that meant they got a better case to get funding for the movie. So it was the first time Red Dwarf had ever been seen in Japan. I think they did.
I think on one of the DVDs
French,
they've actually got the
German,
Japanese episode on
Series
on
1.
one of them. Yeah,
French, German. I think there's a Dutch version somewhere. So it did have its pluses, but I saw the remasters. That to me was fine. And then Series 8, and then I remember watching Series 8, and at the time being incredibly excited. This was new Red Dwarf, and I remember taping them all and finding it really, really funny. My opinions changed a little bit on Series 8 now, but at the time the kind of slapstick on the crude toilet humour was kind of, it appealed to my sensibilities.
Well, unfortunately for me, with actually watching it as it progressed through the series, so I started on Series 1 and worked my way through. My opinions on Series 8 has always been the same. It was utter shite. I mean, thankfully, because I know quite a bit of the history of Red Dwarf, like how it was first written, and I remember it was based on a radio show that Rob Grant and Doug Naylor did called Dave Holland's Space Cadet,
which was part of Son of Cliche.
It was, yes, and because they'd been writing for Spitting Image for quite a few years. And they did actually hand the script to their agent Paul Jackson in about 82, 83 or something like that. And Paul Jackson really found it hard to sell this to the BBC. He wanted to sell it to the BBC because he thought that was the best format for it. Sticking it on an ITV region with 23 minutes and adverts in between really wasn't what he wanted. They wanted to get it on BBC, and it took him 3 years to actually sell it. And then Series 1 obviously was it 88? I've got it written down here. Yeah, 1988. The first series actually finally came out after 5 years, and then it nearly didn't happen because of a strike at the time. Was it a lighting strike?
Yes.
Or that the BBC was constantly being hit by in the 80s.
Yeah.
It affected everyone from even Doctor Who was affected by it. numerous times throughout its history, but it was affected slightly in the 80s as well.
And the story goes that they were originally commissioned to make 7 episodes in the first series, and then they decided they filmed the pilot. They filmed the first episode, which is on the DVD, the Body Snatcher collection, as the end original assembly. Decided bits weren't working, so they used the money and the studio time that was allotted to the 7th episode to remount parts of the first, and then they just delivered 6 episodes. And this is the kind of this is the kind of laid back incompetence of the BBC. Nobody noticed. It was like they were given money for 7 and then only 6 were delivered, and nobody noticed.
One specific episode was written while the series was being filmed, and that was the Me Square episode.
Yes.
And what it was is what the original plans were just didn't quite work, and I think it might have been because of the strike. So they ended up completely rewriting that last episode of the series within, say, maybe a week or 2 before they were supposed to even go in the studio. Which always made me, quite. It gave me a sense of. I can't even think of the word. It's all right. Let's carry on. Sorry.
We'll just discuss a little bit. Like, what is Red Dwarf to you? Like, what do you view it as? Do you see it as a sitcom or a sci-fi adventure? Like, what is most important to you when you're watching Red Dwarf? Is it the laughs, or is it, good sci-fi or good character-based storytelling?
I think with me, it's all of it together. Okay. I think once one starts coming to bigger, so when they started looking more to the sci-fi elements in Series 7 and took away the laughter, it kind of took a lot away from Red Dwarf. So to me, it's the good mix of all 3. So you want the good characterizations in there, you want the humour in there, and you want the sci-fi concepts in there. And a really good episode that shows all 3 of those was the episode Future Echoes, which was the very first one to use proper high concept science fiction ideas, but have the humour there, which, it was actually the first episode that I thought was funny, because the end wasn't that funny to me. I watched it, didn't find it overly funny, but stuck with it and wanted to watch it again. And obviously, because it was the earlier series, the characterizations were, really quite strong, because they were, they wanted to push these new characters into the fore.
How did I do what?
Mm-hmm.
What are you talking about? Stop being stupid. That was me experiencing a Future Echo.
Oh dear.
Scott, what about you? How do you kind of view Red Dwarf? Like, what is it to you?
It's a horrible question to ask, purely on the basis from doing my MA in television and radio script writing. One thing we have to learn is how to take apart a script and look at it and see whether it's sitcom or is it sci-fi. And to me personally, it is sitcom. You could literally situate this underwater. You could situate it in any place and still kind of get away. Maybe tweak the jokes, but in general, basically, it's about 4 people. Well, from the first series, it was 3.
Well, it was still 4 if you included Holly.
Well, yeah, if you included Holly.
And Holly did have quite a big part to play in the first few series as well.
True. But you could situate it anywhere and still get the same humour or element. You just have to find other ways to tie it in. So overall, I would say it's more of a sitcom than a sci-fi. But I do like the sci-fi elements. I think it allows them from being able to go to different planets, or basically if it was to be set underwater, you're going to different lands or different origins. You would still get that same ability to come across with different cultures and different ways. But I think the way that they did it in space allows them to get the aliens and all that, and basically create creatures that are allowed to add to it. So, as a sci-fi piece, I still enjoy it, but I do honestly think it's a sitcom.
Yeah, and that's what was lost a lot in Series 7. I found that the fact that the humour, the sitcom element that was taken away from it, took a lot away from the series. I mean, I enjoyed the series in itself. If you didn't have the first 6 series before it and the series afterwards. In itself, it was a fantastically filmed, really high glossy look for the show, but unfortunately, once the humour was taken away from it, it really didn't have the same feel that those first 6 series had.
I would say that the audience, the lack of audience in Series 7, isn't a problem.
It was for the actors though, because they did say that
Yeah,
it was to them.
Because
They
at the end of the
fed
day,
off the
you had
audience.
a certain extra bit because you've got an audience there. It's like when you're on stage and you're in theatre and you add a little bit more oomph to it.
I don't think the audience are the be all and end all. I think they turn in mighty fine performances. I think part of the problem is the script writing sensibilities of Doug Naylor is his mind was very much kind of on this is going to be a dry run for the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris Barry had also come to fear and dread the audience, so it was kind of a way. It was a way of sort of seducing him back by suggesting that, all right, well, how about you come back for a few episodes and there won't be an audience, and if you like the new way of filming, he might come back on board full time for Series 8. As it turned out, he decided, he conquered his fear of the audience, and the audience was brought back. I think it's more down to the script writing scope, and I think that, for example, with Dave, I mean, I think it's wonderful that they've got an audience back, and we'll talk about that later. But if they hadn't have been able to afford one, I wouldn't have said, well, call the whole thing off. I don't think that an audience is necessarily the be-all and end-all, especially since episodes like Gunmen of the Apocalypse, for example, have about 15 minutes of stuff that was all pre-recorded anyway. So some of the more technically ones that feature a lot of location work, don't have.
I mean, I can understand that side of it, 100%. But I know that Craig Charles has always said that he fed off the audience when they did Series 6 and it was based in such a small set with the Starbug set. He felt that it was stronger when they had the audience there, because not only could they ad-lib slightly, obviously they had to keep to the script, but they did have the odd ad-lib, but you could also time your comedy around the audience being there, so then you had those little pauses for the laugh rather than the laugh going over what someone's saying, which is what happened in Series 7 quite a few times, where you had the audience afterwards go, shit, I can't hear what he just said, because someone's laughing too much, and it's only because they've dumped that laughter track on afterwards. So, I mean, I can understand what you're saying.
But there
are parts of it that don't need to be done in front of an audience. But I think the whole concept of Red Dwarf being done in front of a live studio audience is so much stronger, and the episodes are so much stronger than the ones that are without, really.
Yeah, they did. In Series 7, they did leave pauses to a degree. Last night we watched the extended version of Tika to Ride, and it kind of drags in a way, because it's not tightly edited, and you would pick up the pace normally, but it's because they're leaving pauses for an expected laugh. And there are instances of the kind of nightmare that gives you of like bringing a laugh down in the dub, or perhaps stretching one out because they've got too long a gap there and they can't cut it. So, I mean, generally I prefer it with an audience like both of you. I was just sort of playing devil's advocate, and I would never want that to call the whole thing off, because you've got to be aware that in the days of the 80s, there was this infrastructure where it was easy. There were standing sets with audience rakes where people could sit and watch for a recorded sitcom. Now that's getting harder and harder, and like with the new series, it's been filmed at Shepperton, and
you got to take into account the costs it is to hire studios and build a set and keep those sets without having to destroy them. To put them in storage is expensive. So to shoot on a location or to do it on green screen makes it so much easier to change where you're going so easily, but also to introduce new locations without having that expensive initial cost of a studio.
I mean, sometimes I find that the technology these days still isn't quite there for the green screen, especially. And that showed with Series 9, not Series 9, sorry, the Back to Earth trilogy, how poor that it actually looks, because the sets were CGI and they were plonked in the middle of these CGI, in the middle of this green screen, and you could tell, and it looked terrible, and it really did show. And with the technology not being quite there yet, I don't think it's possible to fully get away from fully realised sets yet. Which maybe in the future.
I think I like the cargo base set. That looked quite impressive, and that was the kind of thing that you would do with on a CGI backplate anyway. But there were some scenes like where Miss Katerina Bartakovsky and Rimmer walking down a corridor, and it did feel. Oh, and there was a bit at the beginning where there was a pan, and you saw a window and you saw Lister walking past, and they did look a little bit false. You know, there weren't any dodgy, matte lines, but on the other hand, it was like it would have been so much better had it had just been a real physical standing set. But you understand the circumstances why it did it, and by all accounts, there wouldn't be a 10th series were it not for Back to Earth.
Back to Earth is that it has brought Red Dwarf back into people's minds.
Well, this is it's one of the things that's always baffled me. Because again, I know we're coming to Series 9 in a second, but it's just the fact that because I find Back to Earth so terrible in conjunction to the rest of them, I don't understand how that's kind of brought it back. Surely, if anything, it would have made people say to themselves, why are they doing 10?
I think it's because it was, even though it was so terrible, it was still quite popular. No, I mean, it was popular. There was, people watched it. People tuned in again because they wanted to see Red Dwarf.
I know, it had a huge...
And I think that's what gave Dave the reason to bring the show back. And when I'm on about Dave, I'm on about the TV channel, not Dave Lister.
So we'll move on now to kind of favourite episodes and moments of Red Dwarf.
I think one of my favourite moments was in the Better Than Life, because it's one of my favourite episodes. I've actually got quite a number. And it's the fact when they get all the letters that arrive, and they get that letter for Rimmer, and Lister's reading it out. He says, "Dear Rimmer," and then he says, "Is this from your mum?" Yeah, it's from Mumsy. And then he goes on, it's Mumsy. And then he goes on and says, "I write to inform you that your father is Dad." Well, of course he is. And then he's like, "No, my father is dead." I just think that's just such a fantastic moment. I think it's probably one of the funniest moments in the series at the same time. But it's also one I think was the episode that finally brought Red Dwarf into a larger studio audience, Better Than Life. It was the one that was the most fondly remembered from the first series, and it gave it the scope to expand into the future, and they're still using that concept in the future episodes where they can actually go into these machines and go into a realised fantasy world and play out the fantasies, and that came from Better Than Life, and that's why that's such a strong episode, and also features some of the best humour in the series as well.
Yeah, what I love about that is it's such an insight into Rimmer's character at the end that basically he destroys the whole scenario.
His diseased mind creates the horrible anti-fantasy that the other two characters have, and it turns the whole of their dreams into horror.
Like it starts off like where he's sort of like evening chaps, and he sort of dives over the table and and meets them in the restaurant, and he's like, "What happened to you?" It was like, "Oh, Magruder showed up," and he sort of he does the fist up moment, and he's like, "Twice in one lifetime, I'm turning into Hugh Hefner," and and then he actually destroys it, and then like at the end it ends with them on the beach with jam smeared on their faces while giant ants are about to eat them. It's like, why, Rimmer? Why? It's like, well, why not?
I also found earlier on in the episode that was quite funny was when they were walking through on the golf course, and there was the fish woman coming out of the water with the head of the fish and the body of a woman. And Lister was saying, "Are you sure that's the right way?" And the cat said, "Well, this is the right way, That's how it should be."
Well, he gets a photograph out, and I don't think many people notice this. The audience don't watch it, don't seem to react to it, but he starts licking the bottom of the photograph, which I always enjoy.
Oh, no. But I mean, for like moments, I would say the second. I mean, I enjoyed the second, third, and fourth series as being the strongest parts of the series anyway. But I think the second series, the strongest moments came from the second series because it also had the brilliant stasis leak in it as well.
Yeah.
And the fantastic scene where the cat can't understand what both Lister and Rimmer are telling him about what the stasis leak is. But the bit that confused me... What is it? But the bit that confuses me the most about that is, how does Lister know all of that technical detail when Lister's already been
well, that's the thing.
said as being useless?
Lister's not Lister's not the bum that he's kind of portrayed to be by everybody. You know, he's not stupid, that's what I always like about him, and that's what I kind of like about his journey, is that he's not, you know, he's a lazy slob, but he's actually intelligent and got sort of. And I think often that you think if it wasn't for Rimmer, he'd be an alright sort of bloke.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, it's just to wind Rimmer up.
Yeah.
And you look at the comparison, and I think one of the better notions, which should have been explored more in Series 8, is you've got a Rimmer who's essentially from Series 1, who's been resurrected by the Nanos, and it would have been nice to be sort of like to have explored that a little bit more, where he. I mean, there's a bit where he says, you know, I've changed, 5-6 years, not in deep space, not counting stasis. You know, I even down that smeg awful pink stuff at the back of the drinks cabinet. That was my window lean. Scott, you got any favourite moments that kind of stick out for you?
Moments. I'm going to go with Demons and Angels. Whilst I was thinking of it, because I was going to go with Quarantine, but Demons and Angels. I just like Mr. Flibble. Yeah, with Quarantine. No, the reason why Demons and Angels, because I don't know why. Basically, there was just something about Rimmer in that god awful suit playing the demon character. Basically, I just thought to myself, what the hell is going on here? Yeah, it was something like out of a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Wasn't it?
And just because it was so creepy and the way he's talking, it's just basically just stuck in my head and I can't get rid of it.
But did you find? I mean, I found this, but Series 5, there's quite a lot of elements in Series 5 that was very creepy.
There was,
like in Quarantine, where she sits up when she was in the ice quarantine, and the eyes suddenly glow, and it sends a shiver up your back.
Yeah.
There's quite a few moments within that series that have them creepy moments, including Back to Reality when they find the 2 or 3 headed alien. But it is quite a creepy series, I find.
I mean, and I think there's some kind of creepy notions in Back to Reality as well, sort of in them finding out about the worst of themselves, like the idea that, you know, Lister in reality is actually, you know, is essentially advocated genocide, and some really kind of nasty ideas in that, which is a different kind of creepy. But I've never noticed that before. But now we come to think about it, it is actually full of quite some kind of horrific images.
It is. I mean, Inquisitor.
Well, this is all suggested.
Terraform. With the demon, the shadow demon, and you know, various other things like that. It was quite a creepy series, so I can understand what you mean about the demons and angels.
I didn't think about the whole series actually as a point, but now that you brought it up, I'm looking at the episode list in front of me at the moment. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have to agree with that.
It did get I think what they were trying to do was because series 3 and 4 were very similar in the formats, that it was more of a sitcom based.
Yeah.
Theme, that the 5th series was trying to be a little bit more sci-fi and introduce more sci-fi elements than previous series, but they also wanted to change it slightly. I mean, I know Series 5 was a hugely troubled series from the directorial point of view, because obviously Juliet May couldn't quite handle the reins of being the director, and Robin Grant had to take over, so there was a lot of behind-the-scenes problems.
But saying that, nonetheless, though, I thought Hollow Ship as a whole wasn't entirely that bad an episode. There were some nice moments in it.
It was a bit overlong, and it was a little bit too. It wasn't as funny as it could have been.
I agree with that.
There's still some fantastic scenes, like the scene when Lister's talking to his sig packet and going, "Listen to Red Dwarf." What we have in front of us is a total smeg pot.
The intruder seems blissfully unaware that we've got a very sturdy hollow whip in the munitions cabinet. Unless he wants his derriere to be turned into burger meat, he better scarf for 10 seconds.
Seems to be quite small in the testicle department, I think, is one of the lines.
Yeah,
well.
Testicle small and inoffensive. What was it? Oh yeah, I was just going to quote the Low Rimmer line. I'm going to thrash you within an inch of your life, and then I'm going to have you.
Ooh.
I forgot about that. I think that was one of the moments. The reason why it stuck in my head, just thinking that's the last thing I would want.
having done, what I like is like having done a performing arts course at university is the high dwarfers, is the on the you know, the happy Dwarf was on the other ship, where it's like, "Forgive me, brother, I appear to have stained thy knife with my blood. 1,000 apologies." And when they do that interpretive dance sequence, and it's like, that's the sort of crap that we used to do at QB.
I am actually glad that you brought them up, because I started going off with the demons and not talking about the angels. I'm just glad you brought that back into the part.
My favourite episode is Terraform, which is also from Series 5, which I think is the best looking series. And once again, it's like, I think I really do like the Lister character, but I think Rimmer is probably my favourite character, and I just love the kind of insight into, again, it's another world that's created by Rimmer's own self-loathing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's nothing, and I love the part where they go through the graveyard, and it's like, Here Lies Confidence died at age 13 or something like that.
Was it the Swamp of Despair as well that they went through? I thought that was, I mean, when you're on about like the look of the series at the time, it was so. It was the first time that it was really cinematic as well.
Yeah.
The use of the lighting and the fog, and I bet it must have been hell for them to film. But
yeah, but it wasn't just that. This is the episode where Ainsley Wright played one of the. Which episode's the gals? That is Polymorph 2.
That's second. That's Series 6.
That's Series 6. Ainsley Harriet did play a.
Then I've got a completely different episode in my head.
Up your,
I'm going to put a nice point forward about the girls there, and it's not even the right episode.
And what I love it's got some great Chris Barry voices, like at the end when his confidence returns, when they get into let's get into a group hug scenario here, and they start rebuilding his confidence, and you get the kind of musketeer like characters coming out of the gravestones, coming back to life and stabbing like his demons or whatever, and it's like, rot in hell, may your self-loathing, may your putrescence, forever. And he's just like he does these wonderful voices. It's great, and I love anything that's kind of a showcase for Chris Barry's. Another favourite is Meltdown, where he does this sort of Patton-esque walk down the line, and he's like, sort of, Mr. Noel Coward, sir, delighted to meet you, dear boy. Shut up! And he's or like Mr. Jean-Paul Sartre. Do you know what we think of existentialists pouncing around with their feelings about the bleakness of the cosmos?
I've got an interesting story about the episode Meltdown. It wasn't one of my favourite episodes, but they had to show that series out of sequence because of various things that were happening at the time.
Yeah.
Meltdown was put to the end of the series because of the Gulf War that had started at the time, and because it was such an anti-war message that was in it, the BBC had to put that episode right to the end of the series. It was originally intended to be a little bit earlier on, and I think it was one of the series. Was it series 4? That?
Yeah.
I think it was the only series that was shown out of order to what the original intention was by the writers.
Yeah.
And it was only because of various things or events that was happening at the time.
And Camille was broadcast first because it was a
Valentine's thing, and it was never intended to be that. It was, I think, Dimension Jump was meant to open the series, as far as I can remember.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been a really good, strong opening to the series, in comparison to Camille, even though I like Camille.
Yeah. But I quite like how it builds, how the series kind of build, because you've got that wonderful sort of, you've got, what is it? It's DNA. Then Justice, and then White Hole, Dimension Jump. White Hole to Dimension Jump, Melt. For me, those are like 3 brilliant episodes, just all back to back there.
And a bit of a nerd fact about White Hole as well: the fact that Paul Jackson had to take over directing because Ed Bye was ill. So the first 4 series directed by Ed Bye, he had to actually. It was the first time that he couldn't complete an episode, and Paul Jackson came down to the floor, and all the cast were nervous because Paul Jackson had come down to direct, and they were quite, because they were filming in Manchester at the time, they were all constantly late for work because they were drinking the night before and this and the other. And suddenly Paul Jackson was on set, and all of the cast were really nervous about performing in front of him. And then apparently in the end, he ended up being a nice person. They wanted him to direct future episodes.
Well, just to explain to Scott, like Paul Jackson was the head of entertainment, or
he produced the first
comedy. He was the producer on.
Okay.
And basically, he got a reputation. His nickname was Wacko Jacko, and he sort of lost it. He produced the young ones and things, and basically, he was famous for giving people a bollocking and.
See, I like that, how that basically, cause every time I've heard Wacko Jacko, I'm used to Michael Jackson, not...
Now we've got Wacko Jacko Paul Jackson.
And basically they said that like when he was on set, like there were all these grips and gaffers and people that they'd not seen for the entire series, but all of a sudden they were there. It was like, what would you like, Mr. Jackson? Would you like that light screwing in? Yeah, I'll climb up that ladder, that's absolutely fine. No, don't worry, I don't need a safety harness. Meltdown, and then of course my favourite moment is that there are two types of people from a CC: steers and queers. Boy, which one are you, boy? That's just
nice Full Metal Jacket reference.
Yeah. I did like the Gandhi doing the push-ups bit, I must admit.
Oh yes.
Get down and give me 100. Are you a wuss?
And I love the way that they're destroyed on the battlefield. It's just like there's an explosion and they've just gone.
Yeah.
Or I think you see like
the two pairs of boots left because of the explosion.
Back to Earth. We'll just sort of discuss briefly like our feeling.
I have made a note about Back to Earth because I've made notes about my memory's terrible, so I've made notes about all of the series and this and the other that I wanted to discuss. And my simple note for Back to Earth is Back to Earth was just terrible and unfunny.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but that's my note on the whole thing.
Have you got anything further to add on Back to Earth?
Yeah, can I just take your notes there?
Yeah.
Before I bring my contrary opinion.
Based off Andy's notes here, Back to Earth was just terrible and unfunny. That's my opinion.
Phil?
I thought Back to Earth was a fun celebration of Red Dwarf past. I liked how it tied into Back to Reality. I thought there were some really nice character moments. I look at that opening with like Lister ironing a sneeze, and it's instantly kind of more funnier than like the opening of Series 8, for example, which had got like...
but you see, I found Series 8 to be terrible and unfunny too.
For me, I think it worked. I love the kind of the metatextual storyline. Before anyone points out a League of Gentlemen movie, it's a common fourth wall breaking is not something that the Mark Gatiss and crew invented. It had been done before, and
It's been done many times before.
Yeah, and I really liked the way they did it. I liked how they tied it into the Blade Runner with the Blade Runner references. I just thought it was
I saw all the references in it. I saw the Blade Runner references. I saw all the different things that they brought into to try to make it of interest. But I just didn't find it funny.
The Coronation Street sequence.
Everything about it was so unfunny. Even the Blade Runner sequences were unfunny.
The Coronation Street sequence, I genuinely thought that was classic Dwarf. Like, I love the notion of like Craig Charles when he sees Lister and he's like, I've got to go back to the Priory, man. And I think Simon Gregson, who's plays Steve McDonald, I think he's really, really good. It's his first time he's ever played another role other than his role in Coronation Street. I think his like incredulous look when he sees them, like, I think he's chewing a pen or something, and then he spots them across the road, and it's like, hey, your crewmates from Red Dwarf, they're here. I think it's really, it's really well done, and I just had a big grin all through it. I was like, yes, it's back. I love the palette of it. I think the palette's very kind of, the ship is kind of very kind of cross between sort of season 1 and 2 with series 5 and 6. That kind of. I like it, and I think there's some impressive sequences. I think the scene sequence, especially considering it was done on a shoestring and people gave up the time for free. There's the scene in the snow where they all crash in slow motion. I think it's really well done.
Do you know what? I'm actually really glad that we've actually got a person on this trio that did actually like it, because otherwise it would have been a very little boring segment of we all found it terrible and unfunny.
Yes.
So I'm really pleased that Phil did enjoy.
I just want to quickly reference towards the sets, because obviously we were talking about obviously the CG backgrounds, but what I disliked about it, because it was all shot on a Red camera. Did you? You know a little bit about the Red cameras, don't you, Phil? Do you know much about the Red cameras?
I've heard about them, but
they're just basically high-end 4K, which means they're basically designed for, you can blow them up on big screens and have perfect picture quality.
So you can see the spots.
But yes, but I just felt, why did you use the red? It was pointless. Plus the set designs that were created CG wise were it looked like a Gaussian blur just stuck on the back, and they just basically done it green screen, kept them in focus, and then basically put a Gaussian blur.
Yeah, because
on
it did look
sets.
blurred, some of the sets, didn't it?
So I couldn't. What's really nice about it from season 8, you don't have that depth. Basically, you can see the sets as clearly as you can see them.
Yeah.
And with this, I found it distracting. The sets, because they were I think they were poorly done, and that Gaussian blur. I think that's probably the reason why they added the Gaussian blur, because they were that poorly done. It just kind of really made it stand out and distracted me beyond belief.
I mean, the thing is about Series 9 is I thought the scope was quite well thought out. The storyline was well thought out. I just think that given the time between Series 8 and Series 9, and it was a long time, it was 10 years, and I know that in some ways that it, maybe Doug Naylor was was told to rush it along a bit or get these scripts out for this celebration. Whatever the reasons behind it, it was 10 years of time that could have produced something so much better than what it was. The story was amazing. It just didn't quite have the original humour. Even the characterizations at some points I found quite off to what they originally were in the first, say, 6 series. And this is why me personally, I'm hoping for so much better when the new series comes out.
Going back to the red camera thing, is it because though you're kind of not the red camera, the CGI sets? Is it because you're kind of more steeped in that world than you are like when you're watching Red Dwarf 1? I mean, the sets, the CGI sets were out of necessity. They were created by students in New Zealand, I think, or it's the guy who did the effects on Farscape, and he's a teacher he's in Australia or New Zealand, I forget where, and like his students produced those shots.
Oh, that explains the state and condition that they were in then.
It's a case of
out of Mongolian CGI students.
I worked on a project where they got students involved with the CG work, and the CG work was absolutely shocking. You do not get students to work on professional work, especially when you're learning how to use it.
But what if that was the only way of having it made? And that's what I would say.
Then I would have preferred it not being made at all.
I agree.
That would have been my
you would have preferred no Series 10. I mean, all of this was because it was a bold experiment for Dave. It's the first time they'd ever commissioned something of its sort. I don't think those CGI sets are that pony. I think it looks pretty impressive. I think in some cases it's better than something in New Who. And it opened the floodgates. It was like, all right, this is successful. We'll give you a little. We like it. It got us good viewing figures. You proved us right. You proved everybody right.
That's the only thing that Series 9 has done.
And now Series 10 will give you a bit more money.
Series 10. That's the only thing that Series 9 has done.
And
apart from making me laugh, which so I was really wimpy, and it was one of those things where I just, after a while, I just stopped going on the internet because I was like, you know what, I'm really happy with this, and I really enjoy it. And if nobody else does, then I'll stop going on forums.
The sole liker of Series 9 is Phil.
No,
from Department Talk Bollocks.
No, there are some people on Ganymede and Titan as well who are fond of it.
Who's Phil's mum and Phil's dad?
Anyway, moving on. So we'll just quickly wrap up with our Series 10 hopes.
Series 10 hopes. Well, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know if you want me to, but I've got here a list of Series 10 episodes with a little bit of information about each one. So do you want me to read them out for you?
Yeah, I think we can.
The first episode is called Trojan, and it says the Dwarfers' mining ship is still creaking through the wastelands of uncharted deep space, but the posse soon stumble upon the mysteriously abandoned SS Trojan. As they inspect the ship, Rimmer receives an SOS distress call from an old foe, his brother Howard, and is suddenly faced with the dilemma of his life. The next episode is Fathers and Sons, where Lister grapples with the problem of being his own father. I think that a lot of that's in the trailer, isn't it, that's being shown?
Yes, but obviously we've already had the reference of his being his own father
from the
earlier on, which was quite a nice episode. I did like that.
Yeah. Well, that's quite interesting, and I'm pleased that Doug Naylor has kind of stuck by his guns, because it would be very easy with Series 7 to kind of wipe it off the face of the earth. I feel that sometimes, like, New Who does that. It's not particularly fond of of its output in the 80s. So it often kind of, doesn't mention it. And I think Stephen Moffat said, you know everything you need to know by the time you get to Earthshock or something like that. I can't remember. Or there isn't, nothing's added to the mythos after 1980. So I'm quite pleased, because it would have been very easy. It would have been very easy for Doug Naylor to have done the same and to have just said, well, nobody likes Series 7, so we'll forget about it. So I'm really pleased. He likes the idea of Lister being his own father.
Yes.
So here I am.
We like the idea that Lister's his own father, because he's just so unusual.
Yeah, so let's make elaborate.
Unless you remember the films, do you remember The Stupids with Tom Arnold, where he does the song "I'm My Own Grandpa"?
Right, the next one is called Lemons. The posse find themselves marooned in 23 AD, where they rescue a famous historical figure with a beard. Any thoughts on 23 AD historical figures?
Jesus.
23 AD could well be, yes. Yeah.
It wouldn't be that far. If I remember correctly, that wouldn't be far off before he got crucifixed.
Right, wouldn't it? Yeah. That would be actually quite a controversial episode. We'll have to wait and see on that one.
That would be amazing.
The next one's Entangled, where Crichton and Cat become quantum entangled, forcing them to do everything in unison. I think that's...
we saw a clip of that. It's been leaked,
shown at the moment, yeah. The next one's Dear Dave. Lister gets involved in a love triangle with snack dispensers 23 and 24. Is that the one that was giving out the bucket in the early episodes?
Possibly. What would be brilliant is if Tony Hawk came back. So he's a grumpy old man. You probably recognise him if you saw him, Scott. He played Caligula in Meltdown.
He was also in not Back to Life, sorry.
Better Than Life,
and he played the compare in a way.
Yeah,
the guy
there's a bar just a
little
little bit further down the beach.
And he also did most of the voices, including Talkie Toaster.
Oh God!
No, he didn't. No, he did one of the Talkie Toasters in the early one.
Second Talkie Toaster was actually the original Crichton.
Yeah, it was David Ross.
And they brought him back to
the first Talkie Toaster.
An actor called John Lenahan. An American actor.
Do
you want some toast? Nice hot buttered scrummy toast.
See, that one I thought it was in.
But he did
a lot.
He did a lot of the.
He was also the warm-up guy in the studio before the start of each episode.
Yeah, that was how they got him, and it's interesting because Eddie Izzard was a warm-up guy in Red Dwarf, and his humour didn't quite fit. Like, he just wasn't cut out for being a warm-up guy. But Tony Hawk's obviously not as big as Eddie Izzard now, but he just fit sort of perfectly with it. And they used to call him the fifth dwarfer before there was a fifth. Fifth dwarf.
He was the fifth one.
See, all I keep thinking about every time you make, because I'm a big skateboarding fan, and basically every time he says Tony Hawk, I can imagine it's Tony Hawk just basically coming in on a vert, basically coming straight into the audience.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be very funny though.
And the final episode is called The Beginning. The series' final episode finds the boys surrounded by a simulant war cruiser and its fleet of attack ships, and only with 2 forks and a pencil sharpener. That was the other clip that we saw.
Oh yes,
the dwarfers begin to wonder whether this is the beginning of the end. Only one man can save them. Unfortunately, that man is Arnold J. Rimmer. And apparently Holly makes a comeback.
Well, that's not been kind of confirmed. Apparently, you might see a few pixels of either Holly or Hilly. I don't think it'll actually be Hilly. I think it's just a case of distinguishing between the two. Norman Lovett has practically pissed on his chips.
Yes, he has. Which isn't a very nice thing to do, especially after a night out on the booze, because then you can't eat them the next morning.
Anyway, Norman Lovett has said some unflattering things about Grant Naylor Productions, like how they'll never get this out off the ground, it'll never come back, or they just keep wasting everybody's time and leading the fan base on. And then literally within a few months of that, Back to Earth is announced. And actually, yes, there's going to be some new Dwarf product, and you kind of missed out on it. So, and I like the female Holly. I think she's interesting when she's written well.
I did
She
prefer
wasn't
the
given
Norman
much-
Lovett one though, to be honest with you. And given the early series, the amount of time that Norman Lovett was given to the on-screen, you know, I mean, especially with the episode Queeg, with the Major Jape. But anyway,
But there's, I think Hattie Hayridge is used quite well in Whitehall, for example.
I
IQ.
think there's some really nice moments between the two of them. I couldn't pick one or the other, but at the end of the day, I just think they were both nice. Nice. They both played the parts well.
Yeah. So, but I'd like to see it, but only if she, got some screen time. I understand that they're on a tight budget, so it's not necessarily possible.
I mean, I am really looking forward to Series 10. I've got very high hopes for it. I'm hoping I'm not going to be let down by those
This
high
is what I'm
hopes.
hoping, because with the leaks, are the leaks something been purposely put on the internet by the league company?
No, they've been purposely.
I know
put on.
sometimes they're leaked.
Dave is putting about a 40.
Stasis leaks.
Yes, but I'm looking positive for it in comparison to the Back to Earth. I am looking forward to seeing what they come up with. Will it meet my expectations, like yourself? And I hope it does it justice.
Live audience, model shots. For the first time since Series 7, Howard Goodall is back. They're not using library cues. They're actually having an originally composed score. It
even looks like Series 3, 4, 5 and 6
Yeah.
put together. It just looks like that.
And I think it's going to kind of push the boundaries of what we think of an audience sitcom can do.
Yes.
I think it's going to be kind of groundbreaking in how retro it is. Because there's this kind of misconception in this kind of... I can't believe I'm about to mention it because it's such a cliche, but in this post-office comedic world, the notion where the studio audience is no longer, and we kind of the only sitcoms that tend to be sort of the likes of My Family or that program with Nicholas Lyndhurst and Tracy Beaker. I forget what it. Those kind of audience sitcoms, and they're kind of considered to be lesser in this country anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping
kitchen sink sitcoms, which is possibly the most direst thing to ever come out of British
So
TV.
I'm really hoping that it shows what an audience sitcom can do. I think it looks like in the past. I think the cast have been guilty of perhaps playing parodies of themselves, of their characters. But
Series 8 was quite a parody, I thought. Yeah.
But it seems like they've kind of dialed it down. I'm really looking forward to the last episode because we promised. I didn't think it was necessary to wrap up the Series 8 cliffhanger, but if they're willing to do it, then great, because apparently it's going to deal with what happened at the end of Series 8, and it's going to utilise some of the storyline for the movie. Perhaps Doug Naylor's decided it's never going to happen now, so he might as well just use it. And model shots as well. So, has anyone got anything else to add about Red Dwarf?
No.
Well, my closing thought would be...
Is this your Jackie Norrie moment?
No, it was what I mentioned before about the spelling of
Wait a
myth.
second. Theme tune.
Oh, yeah.
Go.
So, Jackie Norrie... No, my closing thought would be... there's this misconception, and I remember posting something about the new series of Red Dwarf, about Red Dwarf 10, and somebody posted a comment where they were like, to me Red Dwarf has never been as good when it always looked better when it was cheap, and the sets wobbled, and I hated
never wobbled.
And I hated it, and I hated it when they started using the flashy CGI. And for a start, the model shots are far more gorgeous and beautiful and show depth and scale and shadow and against the star cloth that you can actually see a proper perspective than any of the kind of the CGI, which I understand that came out of necessity. But the CGI isn't better. It's not. The model shots are. And Red Dwarf also has never made any jokes about... It's never done any sci-fi parody jokes. It's never been at the expense of kind of its sci-fi nature. It's always tried to tell good, strong, solid stories about characters with sci-fi concepts. The humour has come from within the story, and it's never been sort of a parody of science fiction. So that's my closing thought. You've got Red Dwarf wrong, people.
Yes, you have.
And I'm hoping that Series 10 will kind of prove what it does best.
Oh, yeah.
That's us for this episode.
Fortnite. What are we talking about?
In the next episode, we're going to be doing a bit of a sort of general news episode. So join us then. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with us, we're DeptTB, D-E-P-T. DeptTB on Twitter.
Write it down, then say it.
Yeah, I'll get it right for the next episode. You can find us Department TB on Facebook and departmenttb@gmail.com on the old email. That's us for this week. I'm Philip.
I'm
And I'm Scott.
Live long and talk bollocks.